An incredible group of people we have assembled here for you today. I'm going to just do some very quick introductions. Juergen, you've already spoken and we've met you, but we're going to ask a question in just a second of yourself. Antoine, would you like to just quickly introduce yourself?
Yes, thanks, Charlie. It's great. It's great to see so many people here today. Amazing success. Congrats.
Thank you.
I'm Antoine. I was born in Paris, but I spent most of my life in the US and in Asia, Hong Kong and Japan. I started being in AI 20 years ago when we developed the very first predictive text entry systems back then when operators were pushing SMS. And then my team and I were involved in developing what became Siri together with DARPA. This is in the early 2000s. About 10 years ago, I started a company called Sentient Technologies, which is one of the larger AI startups in the US. And I'm now chairman of that business, and I'm actually now crossing the river to being on the other side and beginning to invest in deep algorithmic science-based AI machine learning companies worldwide, based out of San Francisco and Hong Kong. That's my life.
And I understand you've just done a first close of a very exciting new chapter.
Yeah, we did a first close of 50, a close thereabout, and we're actually doing a second close in 10 days, another 40 or so, and then we'll be going past 100 this fall. Only entrepreneurs, industrialists, technologists, and their family offices.
Fantastic. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Vishal.
Yeah, so it's fantastic to be here today. I am Vishal. I'm the co-founder and CEO of ProfitOhio. I grew up in India, and I left India in '95, a long time ago, and I've been working all over the world in different roles. The closest thing to AI was when I joined VocalIQ over 4 years ago, which was a startup that came out of Cambridge University. And their focus was to make decisions for voice dialogue systems. So I helped grow that team to 20 people. And soon after that, we got acquired by Apple. And with my co-founder, Dongko Kim, who has a background in reinforcement learning, so we thought that why stop at dialogue? Why don't we build a platform that can generalize decision-making across all industry vectors? So I think that's the benefit of being an entrepreneur. You can have crazy dreams, and you can start to do something about it. So where we are today is we've built the world's first platform for generalizing decision-making, and this year it's deploying in finance and last-mile logistics with our partners in Nordic and Spain, and respectively. The team is about 85 people. We have about 36 PhDs, just to give you an idea of the foundational research that has gone into it. That's the combination of probabilistic modeling, reinforcement learning, and multi-agent systems. In the last 18 months, we've already published 25 papers and filed 4 patents. So there's a huge amount of opportunity for innovation. And
that's based here in the UK?
Yeah, we guys are based in Cambridge, yeah. And we guys firmly believe that the last 50 years were defined by the IP stack, the Internet Protocol stack. And the next 50 years will be defined by AI for decision-making stack. So we want to talk to other companies and other research institutions to help us build out that vision.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for being here. And it's great to see a deep tech company in AI in the heart of England, in Cambridge. So thank you.
Thank you.
Joanna.
Well, thanks again for having me, too. I've been programming professionally since 1986, which is also the same year I first tutored an AI course. I am now a reader in artificial intelligence at the University of Bath. The specialty in my PhD was on making it easier to build real-time, human-like AI for things like robots, computer games, and what I mostly use it for, which is scientific simulations to understand human intelligence and non-human animal intelligence. During my PhD at MIT, I was on a humanoid robot project for a while, and I started noticing that people are really weird about AI, and they have some very exaggerated beliefs about what it's capable of and how it can replace humans. And so I started writing about AI ethics just because I thought it was kind of strange that people thought this, since I was a scientist and I would write about that. Since about 2007, I got more active because of when Ron Arkin was given money by George Bush, the previous scary president in America, to have ethical battlefield robots. And then since 2010, I've been involved in policy, initially in the UK with the principles of robotics that were developed here. And then now I'm doing things for the OECD, Red Cross, the European Commission, whoever wants my help. I feel that's what academics are for. Most of the time we're learning and we're doing sometime researching, sometime teaching. But when people want to get access to that, that's we're a resource. And you were very right. Or no, it wasn't you. It was the MP was extremely right to say that Britain has been a leader in both AI and academia for some time.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you all for being here. This panel is the state of AI. And what we want to try and do in the next 30 minutes is give you a sense of what's real today, what is actually being developed and deployed, what are the opportunities coming ahead, what are the challenges that are coming ahead, and you're hearing from really some of the leading minds in the world on this topic. So I'm looking forward to it. We want to have a really open and frank conversation, and I think, it would be great if we could end the panel with some concrete thoughts and actions that each of you think we should be taking as we build the foundations for this next fourth industrial revolution, or more than a fourth industrial revolution. So Juergen, tell us, what do you see as the most concrete and exciting example of what we can do today? What's actually live and deployed in the field?
Yeah. So what's really working nicely is pattern recognition, which is passive. So you get the data, and then you analyze it, and you can do speech recognition, and language translation, and image recognition, and video recognition, and all these things that didn't work well just a couple of decades ago. And it's all passive, but it's good enough for marketing, where you get lots of data from all kinds of people who are interacting with your websites. And from there, you can then predict which newspaper article do they want to read next, given the article so far, the entire spatio-temporal context, and which ad are they most likely to click at. So. The marketing is maybe just, 1 or 2% of the world economy, but it's big enough to make these companies on the Pacific Rim, like Facebook and Tencent and Alibaba and Amazon, pretty much the most valuable companies in the world.
It's amazing.
It's amazing that this by itself is good enough,
Yeah.
But there are much bigger parts of the economy which are going to be invaded now too, and so in that sense we are seeing only the tip of the iceberg. And for example, healthcare is 10% of the economy, and medical diagnosis is, with pattern recognition, is going to be totally transformed, and soon all of pattern recognition for medical diagnosis, like radiology, CT, heart scans, plaque detection, all of that is going to be superhuman. And then this will have a lot of influence on human lives, and it's already starting. Who is going to own that? It's not clear. Lots of companies have their fingers in that because it's such a big cake. And then the near-term future is going to be some more challenging stuff, which is not just passively observe patterns, but have a machine that creates the patterns through its actions, control processes in plants, chemical processes, robots that do things, that make things, that shape things, that make T-shirts and whatever. And this is harder than pure pattern recognition because you have to perceive, act, and do all the things that robots do. But it's going to happen. Not yet, but and this is going to be a large chunk of the world economy.
And you're seeing that as a year away, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years? What time horizon are you thinking?
So when will we have this little guy, this little robot, and you can talk to it and teach it like a kid to assemble a smartphone? I don't know. But it's not many decades, it's several years. Don't nail me down on anything. But it's going to be huge because, for example, at the moment, why do we have cheap T-shirts for £5 Because some guy in Bangladesh, some slave, is working on Sunday night in an awful factory with 1,000 other people and making T-shirts. And jobs like that are currently economically given to people in slave-like conditions like that, but it's not going to stay like that. It's going to be economical. When is it going to be economical? Not so many decades out, so maybe not so many years out. It's hard
Less
to nail
than a
it down.
decade?
Yeah, I hope, yes.
Well, that would be good.
Yeah.
That would be good. Antoine, where do you see today, thinking about the state of AI right now, where are the most exciting current deployments that you can point to and reference?
There are many. But Juergen mentioned medical and healthcare. It's obviously a great application of perception, right? And that's, I think, where machines excel today, the perception piece. In other words, trying to make sense or trying to understand what you see, what you hear. I think the cognition piece, and I'll talk about that cognition. We are cognition, right? CogX is Cog is cognition. Cognition is where machines are failing today still. Machines are poor learners, fundamentally. They learn quickly, but they learn poorly. And I think one of the reasons why that's the case is because the fundamental algorithmic science that underpins these engines is still fairly early. And as we work on this, then interesting things become available. So yes, you can detect today the early signs of cancer on an image, but what you do with it? What you do with it is the next phase. Today, what you do with it is you go see a doctor, right? Who's going to prescribe you a treatment, and is going to use the existing human level of knowledge to make the decision. The next iteration of this is when machines begin to have a better understanding, a better body of knowledge, and better beliefs. That's important, beliefs than humans do, and make a better decision. And I think that's 5 years out, 10 years out, and that's around the corner.
That's soon, though. Very exciting. Vishal, what was your perspective on this?
Yeah, so being a deep tech company, so we'll probably, whatever we see here is probably 1 or 2 years before it comes to a mass market. So I'll continue with the points with examples to things like healthcare. So from that perspective, as Juergen and Antoine mentioned, there are already big breakthroughs because of the maturity of the perception technology.
Or actually, what about the two examples that you're deploying now, logistics and financial services? Maybe talk to that.
Yeah, so I think in actually both those areas, so the bits that we are seeing the big change is the area around decision making. So far, the two other areas of machine learning that have been very, I would call it very mature, is the perception side. We become very good at classifying images, objects, and also making good probabilistic models. But the key is making decisions. And in any real world application, whenever you're trying to make decisions, there are few things that are very common. First of all, what we are trying to make is a sequence of decisions rather than just one shot, because every decision that we make has an outcome, so we have to have awareness of that. Second thing is that data is never complete, so all those decisions are made under uncertainty. And the third thing is that every decision that we make inherently is multi-agent, so it's not a single agent. We always interact with other people, and there are implications of that. So the changes we are already seeing this year is the impact of moving away of AI from classifying the past to making decisions about the future. So that's the big shift we are seeing this year.
And your platform is actually doing that. You were talking about logistics and financial services examples. You've got deployments happening this year?
Yes, we've got 2 deployments, actually 3 deployments happening this year. The first one is with a Nordic-based financial institution, Mandatum Life. They've told me I can name them now. So they are launching a totally new co-branded fund together with us. It's going to be a CTA fund trading futures, which goes live in the late 3rd quarter of this year. And they are going to use signals from our platform to do trading and also asset management. And the second one is with a company called PAC. It's a Barcelona-based challenger logistics company. They are operating in 56 cities in Europe. And they are using our platform for last mile logistics. Got it. Those are the cases, yeah.
So these are real deployments this year?
These are real deployments.
Very exciting.
And yeah, it should be exciting.
Fantastic. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Joanna, what's your perspective on this? Where do you see the opportunities and the things that are deployable today or certainly in the short term?
Well, yeah, I think it's really important to realize a lot of people have been talking about AI in terms of machines, as a robot, as it might be a person. And incidentally, if you've raised a kid for 18 years, you probably don't really want to do that again with a robot. But you probably won't have to, because robots aren't people. You can have one person raise a robot for 18 years, and then they all have that knowledge. So I think we need to be thinking what I'm most excited about, and all the stuff that's being done is fantastic. All these applications. AI is prosthetic intelligence. We're smarter. Everything gets better. Healthcare, financial services. law will be cheaper and more accessible to more people because you won't need as many paralegals. You can empower individual lawyers in a different way. At the same time, so is financial crime. So we're empowering everything. We're empowering transnational interference in elections. So I think the really exciting thing to me, I mean, terrifying and exciting, is this competition between, can we help regulate society better? Can we get on top of financial crime and money laundering and things like that, and actually get money that's being eroded into corruption and invested into the infrastructure, our social and political infrastructure that we need for our safety and our sustainability. I mean, on a personal level, I'm also super excited about just translation, real-time translation. How is that going to change society if everybody gets to talk in their native language? There's still going to be, of course, problems in understanding, but like instead of us native English speakers having huge advantages, that would be awesome.
Yeah, that's a big idea. Well, those are two huge ideas. I mean, opening up communication like that across countries and cultures and languages is amazing. But your point about the financial system and financial crime is also, I mean, obviously that in London, that's been a big topic for quite a while, with all kinds of people having to pay fines and so on. So is that something that's a bit further out, or is that something you're seeing people working on here today?
No, people are definitely working on that and worrying about it and figuring out how to regulate it. Obviously, it's going to transform a lot of companies, so we don't know which ones are going to win and lose if we succeed. And again, it's not clear who's going to win or lose on this in terms of, is corruption winning or is regulation winning? So I think this is something that's actively going on right now that we're seeing. There was something else I wanted to say. That's all right. I'm sure it'll come back.
We'll come back to it. So no, that's a great start. What I'd like to do is just get the conversation moving around some of the challenges. So a common theme here is really talking about how do we get the foundations right so that, okay, there are fantastic opportunities. How do we get the foundations right for economic development in the UK, in Europe, obviously the whole world, and in a positive sense, and where everybody's able to benefit? How do we make sure that that we put the right foundations in place from an ethics standpoint? But I think in general, it'd be great to just hear from each of you about where you think the biggest challenges are there. And I mean, we have so many countries, and obviously this is open source technology. It can be distributed everywhere. Maybe Juergen, could you start and just talk about where you see the challenges ahead of us?
So maybe for a moment, let's talk about the political challenges. On the one hand, we know that most of this AI stuff and deep learning stuff was invented by Europeans. However, there's no huge European company that is making a lot of money.
Why is that?
And that is the big question. What can we learn from China and America? What do they do that we don't do? And so, of course, both have a huge market, which is one good ingredient for scaling up things more rapidly. And both also have substantial industrial policy. Famous American companies like Amazon or Tesla have received billions of subsidies. Same is true for Chinese companies. And we see also how the two superpowers, how they deal with each other. So they are very eager to protect their own turf. For example, when Facebook tried to march into China, the Chinese said, we can't have a foreign company in all our living rooms, and some of these living rooms are inhabited by decision makers, and we can't have a foreign company map all these social networks and have a leverage then, because we know exactly that if Facebook has the data, many other companies are also going to have this data, or secret services and whatever. So we are championing our own companies, and today Tencent, of course, is on the same level as Facebook on the stock market. Yeah. Same is true for Amazon versus Alibaba. So industrial policy helps a lot. Europe is producing a lot of taxpayer-funded breakthroughs, and that is used then by the companies on the Pacific Rim. However, they don't have any industrial policy, and that's why today the Internet of Humans, at least, is owned by companies on the Pacific Rim, and they are not going to give it up. So Google and Facebook, I'm sure they are dominating England as well as Germany in terms of social network and search and so on, and the same is true for Baidu and for Tencent in China and so on. Now, what is it that what can be done?
Yeah,
Is there anything,
I was going to say,
is there anything that can be done? I guess we have to imitate some of these industrial policies that, and the question is, can Europe as a whole get its act together to do something like that, not only as one nation, as one single nation here and another one here, but as a whole, in the face of Brexit and things like that? Is it possible to do that? Is it possible to imitate China, which says, okay, let's spend $2 billion on an AI park in Beijing. Just Beijing, not all of China. China itself gets lots of billions, but just $2 billion on this one city.
Staggering amount of investment.
Yeah, so I'm happy that suddenly the German government is interested in my opinion on that. So I tell them, imitate them and take a famous city, probably Berlin or Munich, and do the same thing, $2 billion. And there are enough smart guys who also know how to invest these $2 billion rather wisely, and money has this way of getting smarter over time anyway. And I'm sure I could say exactly the same thing for London. So yes, London here. Have a $2 billion AI park. You have enough great scientists who have a good idea of how this money should be spent. Do something along these lines. Facilitate the conditions for startups such that it's easier not just to found them, but also to scale them up, like in China and America.
Got it. So more investment in Europe, but not the protectionism that China has done by having these walls in place.
But both superpowers have protectionism. For example, America, of course, says no. Huawei, which is the biggest network equipment maker in the world from China, they cannot really do business in America. Or they try
apparently
to.
they have by sharing data with Facebook, I heard.
Yeah.
Paper the other day.
So
Hey, let's jump to Joanna. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. I know it's something that you've been looking into and the economic impact of AI globally.
So I mentioned already this thing about corruption. What you could visualize that as the people who are thinking that inequality is a great deal, that some individuals are getting lots of resources, that they need to pile up those resources in a very steep way. We saw this again at the end of the 19th century. So what happened was we got incredible instability, and so I do worry about trying to think about how. I think what happens. I don't think it's anybody being evil. It's people that get a good advantage when you have when you have technologies that reduce the cost of distance. Then you're going to basically have fewer winners because the winners can spread out and have more people. So I think there's a very big question, which is about inequality versus getting the Gini coefficient, not down to flat, but down to, apparently empirically, about 0.27 is the best coefficient, Gini coefficient. So you get money to the innovators that are doing cool stuff and the good ideas, but you also get enough money out into the general public so that they can have decent lives and so that they can spend money. That's actually when you have the inequality at 0.41 like we do, both UK, US, I have both hats, then you actually start destroying your own economy because nobody can spend money. So I think there's big questions about that. I mentioned the corruption, and then the other really big thing, the news in The Economist last week about 500,000 Uyghurs, Chinese Muslims in re-education camps, having stop points every 0.25 kilometers. Checkpoints, and some people are saying that similar things are happening to those who are on welfare in the UK, that the reason there's no protests about being struck off for 3 months because you've turned up late to an appointment is because everyone knows we have your data, and you cannot do that or you'll be struck off even longer. So making sure that we use all this information to protect liberty and flourishing is a huge challenge. I think that's one thing we really have to be thinking about.
I'd love to come back and understand whether there are some thoughts about what the solution to that is, because that sounds really fundamental part of the foundations. Now, Vishal, I know you have some quite strong views about where some of the challenges lie, and it would be great to hear some of those here today.
Yeah, so I think the first challenge with European AI and UK AI is just lack of confidence, and I think that's why in the past, in general, a lot of companies have not been able to scale up and be globally dominant. And as Juergen pointed, a lot of stuff gets invented in this country or somewhere in Europe, but it's the Americans who make most of the money. And having lived in the Valley and after that decided to come and live in Cambridge, the reason was that in my experience, the valley was 10% tech and 90% hype, and Cambridge was just the opposite. So I thought, okay, if there's a place where you can add a lot of value, is here. And so I think the core bit that's missing from entrepreneurs and in Europe and in UK is a self-confidence. I'm not sure where it comes from. Probably it comes from the need to understate, but then they combine understatement with under-ambition. And I think people need to understand they're two different things. You can be understated, but you can still want to grow big and dominate.
And what about, just picking up on that, I'll come to you in a second, Joanna, just the question about the geographies and the developments taking place in America and China and the UK, how do we get on the front foot there?
Yeah, so I think a key important thing out there is that what we can't take out from this entire equation is the geopolitics. And Joanna put that very well, so that there are certain very brutal regimes out there that are very kind of autocratic. And I think we can't have a situation where they gain technological dominance in the field of AI. You know, it's our responsibility as people here in Europe, whether we are from academia, whether we are investors, whether we are entrepreneurs, we have to put our foot down and we say that, listen, this is important. As any other technology, it can be weaponized, it can be used as an instrument of control. The benefit that we have here, that if a certain government does not comply to that fair treatment, as Joanna pointed out, we have the opportunity to vote them out of power because they are elected representatives. But some of the other governments out there don't have elected representatives, and that's why they can throw 4, 5, 10 billion. We shouldn't take it as something that's good. We just should step back and see that how we can make sure that they don't end up controlling the stuff that we are building here. Should we have export controls for AI? I think so.
Interesting.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in about economies are defined by currencies. And since 2007, the Eurozone has been the world's largest economy. And we don't talk about this. And we all know that there's a lot more to the EU than only the Eurozone. So we're doing something right here. And I do think it is partly because we have decent regulation. Now, I'm not saying that it isn't a huge issue that China and America have enormous pools of data about all of us and things. We need to think about not only what that says for privacy, but also about having, just like with GPS, that we probably need a European, and the EU has announced that they're going to have their own data lake or whatever. But don't run down the EU too much. It's incredibly successful and powerful and rich, and that's why everybody's implementing the GDPR, because they care about European customers.
So those are some pretty fundamental points around how we potentially regulate AI. Antoine, you have a global perspective because I know you're constantly between Hong Kong, California, London. I think every time I speak to you, you're in a different country. You know, how does this play out, and what are the challenges? And I mean, regulation, is that something we should be really entertaining?
When it comes to regulation, I'm fundamentally against it. There was something that was said by Matt just before, which was we need to give people the right to fail. And I think Silicon Valley didn't make itself based on regulation. Yes, it was, I remember when we worked with DARPA just 15 years ago on Siri, what became Siri. Yes, there was government involvement in pushing technology and in innovating upon technology. But fundamentally, the person who dreamed of Siri eventually was Steve Jobs. Right? He said, I can use this. Right? I think...
That's it, but that's a great point, wasn't it? It was DARPA funded? Which is a defense.
DARPA put $250 million in developing what effectively became Siri.
Which is military or defense investment. Yeah. And was it a restricted technology? Was there export restriction on it when it was in that stage?
No.
Okay.
No. But I think, so they had a vision this could be useful in the field, right? But it could also be useful in the office. And lo and behold, it became useful just not only in the office, across the board. And I think it's going to be even more useful going forward, this type of an approach is. The point being here is that I don't think Silicon Valley made itself based on regulation. It made itself because people are allowed to fail. And fail once, stand up, fail twice, stand up. Eventually, the third time, the fourth time around, you're going to make it work. And I think, so I want to flip this a little bit. In Europe, we tend to talk too much about regulation, about protection. I would like us to talk about innovation and empowerment and investment, right? That's why I started a fund. We're not just investing in China and the US, we're doing that too, but also we're investing in Europe, we're investing in Israel. I fundamentally believe that this is, today at least, over the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, yes, we'll have to talk about regulation. But let's focus on innovation. Let's focus on creating value. Because if you don't create value, eventually you don't get to have a seat at the table.
Sure.
Right?
Absolutely. And it obviously, it comes back to proud of being here in the UK and are we building more great tech companies that could steal. I loved your point earlier that we're at just a few percentage points of the economy with advertising, and there's just so much more still to come. Now we've got 5 minutes left, so it would be wonderful for there to be some thoughts and ideas as to what everybody here, as they spend time both in this session and other sessions, could be thinking about as, you know, what are the concrete actions that we should be taking to make sure that we get these foundations right as we go forward, that we have the best opportunities to build great companies here. And if we could go down the panel, starting with Juergen again, but we're going to have a minute, just under a minute each, to give some closing thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with PR. Europe has more billionaires than any other continent. It's still true, although the relative fraction is shrinking. However, most of these are extremely conservative and have a different attitude to money than those young guys who maybe became a billionaire at age 20 and in Silicon Valley, and then are happy to spend 100 million on this startup here, and maybe it goes down, but maybe it becomes 10 billion and whatever. And to educate people and also those with money, we probably need more PR along these lines. How can you achieve that? That is a difficult question, because these are circles which are not easily convinced of anything. And then maybe it helps. So generally speaking, I think it would help if Europe would invest, or European newspapers, for example, European media would point out that much of the stuff that is now shaping the modern world was coming from Europe.
Right.
And that it's not the case that this is imposed from the outside by some evil powers from the outside. No, it's coming from here.
Right.
And so we can be part of it. What is going to happen in the near future is that, so it's true that the Internet of Humans is owned by Americans and Chinese. That's okay. The Internet of Things is going to be much, much bigger than that, because there are so many more things and machines rather than humans. And it's not owned by anybody at the moment. And there is no place more destined to become the leading force in that field than Europe, because here's the place where the machines are made and the things are made. And the main competitors are actually in Japan, Korea, and more China. What is going to happen is that this field of machines and world market leaders in niche markets, they are going to converge with AI, and these machines are going to get smarter and smarter, and no better place than this place to be number one there. There's a reason why IBM Watson headquarters and Internet of Things is not in America, but in Europe, in Munich.
Fascinating. So we need to be better at telling our own story here in Europe, and we need conferences like this to help promote all the European businesses. What a great thing. Antoine, tell us some closing thoughts.
Yeah, so we need conferences like this, and congrats again, Charlie and Tab. But I think also for one very important reason, and that is we need to learn. Here's why. I think in this day and age where we are in the very first inning of the rise of AI, the very first inning, to use a baseball term, because it's so early, the winners in this game will be the folks who can learn well and learn quickly. Whether it's the entrepreneurs, the investors, the early adopters among enterprises, it's going to be people who learn fast and learn well.
So not just the algorithms learning, the
exactly,
entrepreneurs.
institutional learning, how we humans learn. And we never learn alone. That's the thing. You learn in collaboration. You learn with others. And I think if we can have, I'm doing advertising here. If we can have more of these right here, we'll do a lot better.
Fantastic. Thank you. Vishal, I know the counter's down to the last few seconds, so Joanna's going to have the closing thought, but if you could quickly give us yours.
Yeah, so I'll keep it short. The reason why this entire IoT telecommunication revolution and the fact that we can walk around with this instead of 16 devices in our pocket happened because of standardization in the late 80s, early 90s by the GSM standard, and that related to all the cellular stuff. So I totally agree with Antoine. There's room for innovation and room for open innovation, but standardization has this role for baseline technologies. And I do believe there is a stack layer within AI, specifically around decision making, where there is a need for standardization to ensure that transparency is achieved, because unless you don't have an open, transparent layer of making decisions using AI, you can't apply ethics and transparency to it. So I think we have to start with that.
All right, well,
Joanna, you get the last word, and then we'll be wrapping up.
My keynote started in the ethics tent 2 minutes ago, and I don't know if the slides are working, so I'm dying to know. But I guess the most important thing is I do worry. Look, the reason that humans are great and are dominating, in fact, if anything, too dominant of the entire ecosystem is because we're cooperative. There are public goods. And the way by which we maintain the agreements that we make in order to make us all survive and thrive is through governance. Regulation is not a bad thing. It's the way that we do cooperatively. And if the government runs away from us, then we need to get involved with it and try to make sure that it's doing the best thing we can do. We need the kinds of brains that are doing the innovations on AI to also be thinking about all kinds of intelligence, including transnational cooperation, local governance, and national governance.
Thank you, Joanna. That was a great summary. So still lots more to discuss. We've got 2 days to do it. I know you're doing a fantastic session on the ethics page. I know
right now.
Stage, so you better run. Thank you, my panel, Juergen, Antoine, Vishal, Joanna.